Hey, Sandy.
Hey, Nora. What the fuck? It's Tuesday.
Didn't we just upload an episode? Didn't people just listen to us?
We did. But okay. I mean, I think something pretty important happened yesterday. And I thought, you know what? Let's just get together, talk a little bit again, one more time, just to have a discussion about what this means and what it's about. And also, Nora, if I may say, our predictionometer, it's right on.
Honestly, I feel bad that we didn't predict a last-minute amendment. I feel like that was so obvious.
No, but we did. We kind of did. I mean, look, what we predicted, obviously we are talking about the motion that was just taken yesterday in the House of Commons that was served by the NDP and that passed on Palestine, Gaza, Israel, the whole situation. And what we predicted, as you'll have just heard, dear listener, was that the motion would pass. That was Nora's half of the prediction. And my half was that they would delay and try not to take a position.
Okay, yes, so fair enough. You got it.
And so, I mean, it wasn't precise enough to say that they would make an amendment, but we were both pretty spot on, even though we were not in agreement.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about this. This is important enough for us to have done bonus content for you today on this motion. And I've seen a lot of reactions to it. Let's recap. So the NDP puts forward a motion that calls for many things, including a two-way arms embargo between Canada and Israel, calling for Canada to recognize a Palestinian state, calling for a ceasefire, which, has already happened, but happening again, that's fine. And a couple of other things. And the Liberals last minute put forward a motion that wasn't even translated. They had to wait for translation to get it into French, which in my mind is very telling, actually, because usually the Liberals would be on top of that kind of thing. And it significantly watered down the NDP motion. So Sandy, the question, is this a victory? Where are we at? What does this motion do? How are we supposed to read this? Because there's huge debate today and last night on how progressive people are supposed to read this decision.
Yeah, I think, man, I understand the desire to see it as a win. And I think that what is more helpful is to zoom out a little bit and not think about this particular situation in terms of wins and losses, victories and failures. I think what's important is to think, okay, look, there is a genocide happening. It is impacting people all over the world, but very clearly a group of people who need support right now. And that should be the lens that tells us whether something is how we want to view something, how we want to read something. Now, what I see here, the watered down motion, and there are some folks who have made some side-by-side comparisons online, is very par for the course of what the Liberals do. They try to negotiate something that is zero change to what they're doing already. And that is what they have done in this instance. Now, what does that tell us? I think as people who are progressive, who care about this issue, who are deeply moved and activated to try to do something, what we're being given is a signifier that the NDP knows that they have to be on the right side of history on this. They have to be seen as pushing forward something, and they're willing to push forward a little bit. They submitted a motion on February 27th that was not the motion that passed yesterday. They put their weight behind it. Okay, but they're also willing to be swayed by the Liberals. The Liberals. What happened yesterday also tells us is that the Liberals know that they have to appear, that the tides have shifted. This type of emotion would not have passed a year ago, right? They know how they need to appear to the electorate, where the electorate is at. that people are very frustrated about what's happening in Gaza. And so they're okay to put a list of things down, of things that are already happening, and say, yeah, we're going to do this. But what it doesn't do in that zoomed out way is have any meaningful shift or change to what's happening on the ground right now. And so you can use that information of how the NDP wants to look, how the Liberals want to look, to make your next move as an activist. But I personally don't think it's helpful to try to argue, we claim victory here. What does that mean?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, there's different kinds of victories being claimed. And I think that the groups, institutional organizations like the National Council for Canadian Muslims, Labor Against the Arms Trade, groups that have been fighting for this stuff, anytime you see even minor legislative wins, that it makes sense to me that you would declare that a victory. I think, though, for activists who are not necessarily speaking on behalf of organizations, to claim this as a victory is so cynical, frankly. Because it's as you say, there is nothing today that is different than was yesterday. And we have to figure out what would have changed had this failed. So here we have a non-binding motion that the Liberals can fully ignore. If it was a binding motion, I think that the argument that compromise may have been necessary is much more strong. But here we have a non-binding motion. And I've seen some people argue that the fact that this was debated and when there was so much attention on Gaza and, the comments in the House of Commons were really, really strong and good, that's the victory. So if we're saying that the motion being served in the first place by the NDP was the victory, then let's be clear about that. And I think that that's fine. I think that that's fair. I think that the NDP has been so disappointing for so long that the fact that they even served this motion, that's a victory. Great. But to then say that then there's another victory in an absolutely different motion, watered down by the Liberals, and then agreed to by the NDP and then passed, and that is a victory, I think that that's where that doesn't continue to make sense any longer. Because what do we get with this passed motion? We get the fact that the Liberals have reinforced that they are going to say they're doing things that they've already said that they're going to do, whether or not they actually will. But, we've already got them on the record saying that they're not going to allow certain arms exports to Israel, that settlers are, we will sanction West Bank settlers. And this stuff has been mentioned already. Now they have a non-binding motion. So I guess we can wave around the motion and say, but you said. Okay, so that's what we get from this. And then, of course, to a temperature, I guess, gauge that the Liberals have shifted somewhat, because as you say, they wouldn't have passed this, before. Fine. But what do we get? Also, we get the Liberals being able to say that they care about Gaza and not doing anything. With the support of the NDP. It's on my mind, the Liberals have once again snookered the NDP. And they took what should have been a moment where you are either on this side or you on that side. And the Liberals were like, no, we're going to change the terms of the debate to make it so that we can fully support this and not have a divided caucus. Because the Liberals are trying to play all sides on this. And so they got rid of the most biting stuff, which is also let's be serious. If Canada supports a two-state solution, that de facto means we support a Palestinian state. So why did the Liberals have to remove that? And why did this all happen after the literal chief of staff of the IDF had a conversation with Justin Trudeau before this vote? I mean, it's all very, very, very gross. And I don't think that defeat, when we say that this was a defeat, or we say that this was only a very tiny, 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 tiny victory, that is not denigrating the work of the activists to make this happen at all. The fact that it was debated is the proof that the campaigns are working. And the fact that the Liberals felt that they had to vote in support of this and they had to do whatever they could to vote in support of this is proof that that activism is working. But my God, we also have undeniable proof of the absolute uselessness of the Canadian parliamentary system to deal with an ongoing genocide.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to also look at this stuff in context. I mean, South Africa is arresting people who come back, who come back to South Africa who have served in the Israeli military, right? Like, take a look at this in context of what's going on all over the world. You know, take a look at it in context of how many other countries recognize Palestinian statehood. You know, like we said earlier on this this day of podcast releases, a non-binding motion, a motion is one tool that's available. Okay, let's see more. Okay, like that, there are other tools that can be used and must be used if, again, this is, you know, if these people want to be able to sleep at night, they have tools that they can use. And, you know, to me, like I mean, just go take a look at the stuff that was removed from the motion. From, again, a non-binding motion. I don't think it's worth it for us to go through everything when you can see it side by side online. So please go find that and take a look. Maybe we'll post to something when we post this. But, like, it's just, again, just really indicative of just doing the absolute least. The absolute least. I mean, you don't need a lot of courage from the safety of Parliament Hill to do what's right.
No, exactly. And what does the NDP get out of this? Like, this is what I'm so frustrated with. It's like, you cannot have all of your passionate arguments and defenses for why we need to recognize Palestinian statehood and then be like, okay, you know what? Just take that out. That's fine. And actually, yeah, you know what? Why don't you add also that we're going to fight for the demilitarization of Hamas? So, like, as if Canada has any power over that. Now we're just cosplaying politics, actually. And it's fine to cosplay politics when you're 17 years old and you're doing Model UN. It is less fine when it is literally the House of Commons in Ottawa. You know, there's this idea among a lot of left-wing activists that if you don't accept certain things as victories, you will demobilize people and you will burn them out and they will feel like they can't be in it for the long haul. And I think that that's a fair thing to argue when we're talking about things that are boring, like fighting against student debt or fighting for more healthcare or fighting for better public transit systems, like things that is like not life and death.
No more income contingent loan repayments.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to explain income contingent loan repayments to somebody.
Yeah.
First of all, which is already a slog up a hill. And then you're trying to get all of the people who give a shit about income contingent loan repayments remaining a part of that movement, that campaign. That's hard. And so, you know, strategically and rhetorically, we're really clear about what's a victory. Like, it is a victory that anybody ever said the words income contingent loan repayment, because in some ways it is kind of magical if you get somebody to pay attention to something like that. Not all strategies work for every single situation, right? Like, it's not that you are not talking about the same thing when it's a genocide. That all over the world, governments are taking far harder lines on this and being very activated. It's the number one thing in the news for months. And ethnic cleansing is happening. Over 30,000 people have died. Like, I can say many, many things to signify what a tragedy and what a like how our fucking attention should be pointed at this. It's not the same as, you know, when you're trying to shift policy that is a little like out of the realms of people's imagination or something that they're thinking about. This is on folks' mind.
Yeah. And, you know, like, I think about the fact that yesterday I was in a press conference and I was there with a member of the Liberal caucus, a parliamentary assistant. And as she was leaving, I was like, hey, don't forget, you got to vote in favor of this motion. And she kind of gave like a non-committal, like, right. Oh, I didn't expect that to come up as she was like leaving. And I know that activists spent a lot of time convincing politicians to take the right position. And when the Liberals pull the rug out from underneath the NDP in this way, and then the NDP agrees to it, that is the betrayal. That is the betrayal. And I have absolutely no use for anybody that wants to launder the NDP's betrayal in this, because as you like, the stakes are too high for us to be like, okay, you know what? We'll deal with Palestinian statehood later. Oh, okay, we'll water this down so the Liberals can support. What do we get out of Liberal support of a non-binding motion? It's like, I literally want to scream, because it seems like we are so desperate on the left in general, not necessarily everybody who's been organizing for Palestine, because this is an issue that they really, really, really care about. But like those us left-wing people that are always the ones who are present at this stuff all the time, because, you know, all these issues are connected and we've been doing it for years. We're addicted to losing and calling our losses victories, and not being able to find the rhetorical tools to tell someone, look, the Liberals have agreed to this. They've agreed to not an arms embargo, but language that's like really convoluted, that I've seen journalists and activists alike have to quote, because you can't really paraphrase it because you might get it wrong. But it basically says that, you know, they will no longer export arms to Israel, especially if those arms look like they may violate Canadian law. Okay, fine.
They won't approve further transfers. That's actually the language that it uses.
Right,
it's
they
like
won't approve
future.
They won't approve further transfers.
Yeah.
And they've been very slippery on defining that already. And I've seen people from Project Plowshares who've been doing this kind of work for a long time saying this is positive. And then I've also seen Alex Kosh from the Maple saying the way that the Liberals have been changing the language on this is meaningless. Of course, we can say it's probably both of those things. Both of those things can be true at the same time. But what a distortion of our priorities when we look at political power and we say, you know what, let's put all of our energy behind fighting for the NDP to do this thing. And the victory, as I said, was getting the thing on the agenda and debated. That's awesome. That's great. And had it failed, that would not have been a failure of the NDP. That would not have been a failure of left-wing movements. And it would have actually forced a cleavage within, I mean, we can't say that word in English. It's a Frenchism. It would have forced a...
No, you can say cleavage.
Okay, it would have forced a cleavage in the Liberal Party, which actually was really, really important, because sure, we know that there are some Liberal MPs who are in favor, but what actually would have happened is there would have been a lot of Liberal MPs who abstained. And the abstentions would have spoken volumes. And then you start to pick off people in different ways to do your organizing. But instead now we've got the Liberals who are totally now on the side of Gazans, and they'll be able to wave this around when they're on the doorsteps and say, but we voted for a ceasefire. We voted for an arms embargo for Israel. We voted for all of these things. It's like, you did it again, NDP. You gave them cover again. How do you keep doing that? Who is paying you from the Liberal Party to do these things?
Yeah, I think part of this too, is like a tension between like ego and principle in politics. Like people want to feed the egos of people who might otherwise be, I don't know, jaded, I suppose. Like that's the way I've always interpreted it when we're talking about things like income contingent loan repayments. You know, you have to feed the ego of the people who are supporting you so that they don't get jaded and tired of the issue, and they can continue to support you. That should not, like, I don't know whose ego is a part of the campaign to stop the genocide. But I mean, just, it's not important to feed that right now. It's really not. Like the tension that comes between like the principle of what you need done. And I mean, like, let's be clear what Nora is saying, like it is more strategic that if you have to lose the vote because you say statehood, if you have to lose the vote because you say immediately stop all transfers, or immediately stop all arms exports, or whatever the original language was. If you have to lose the vote, it is more strategic to lose the non-binding vote because you know where people are. And that's something that you can action. You can't action this because all you know is that people know how they have to appear in the Liberal Party. And people know how they have to appear in the NDP. But nothing about this makes anybody move and do any of the hard work. And that means there's a lot more to be done.
Yeah. And of course, and if you have people who are claiming that this was a victory or saying that there's more to be done too, and that's the eternal obviousness. Of course, we have to keep working. But Sandy, did you see what actually was a big announcement, a victory announcement that was announced yesterday by the Liberals?
Oh, no, I didn't.
You may have missed it because I only caught it because I saw French media reporting it and it came out late in the day. Mark Miller announced that they're going to increase the number of Gazans that can come to Canada.
Oh, wow. I didn't hear that at all. No.
Yeah. So when we're talking about victories, that's a really good example of, the parliamentary system is fucked. And the way that the NDP has given all their power to the Liberals is a really good sign of that. We don't have any hope in the parliamentary system. You can leverage riding by riding, organizing. That's really, really important. You can try and get certain champions within certain MPs. That's really important. Certain MPs are helping some Palestinian families, Liberal and NDP and Bloc. That's really, really important. But to expect a motion, a non-binding opposition motion, to be the thing that might create the victory, the conditions for victory, is very naive, I think. But when you see Mark Miller say, actually, we are going to increase the number of Gazans that can come to Canada, that's where you see the pressure from the streets. And that's where you see the activism of the families and the activism of Palestinian movements to be able to show that actually, yes, we can force some of these changes. And that's the kind of energy that we need to put into this. And that energy is multifaceted, and that energy is going to be different depending on who you are and what kind of organizations you might work through, or if you're kind of just, showing up every week to protest in the street. And yes, there's still only been 12 people that have been approved. And yes, no one has actually come yet. But we need more people approved too. And we need more scrutiny on this, and we need more attention paid to this, and we need to demand from Mark Miller, why hasn't those 12 people, haven't they come yet? And one of my theories is that they're probably actually scattered among families and they can't come because the rest of their family is not approved yet. But we don't know. So there are pressure points that we can fucking fight for, and there are real victories that we feel good about. And I don't know, Sandy, do you think that this feeds cynicism and actually demobilizes to call very minor victories like a huge fucking success?
No, not for something like this. I don't think that it demobilizes personally, but I don't get the argument, to be honest. I think it is attempting to apply something that we are familiar with in other situations to this, and they are not the same situation. So it doesn't make sense to me. I honestly think it's more strategic to just talk about it as what it is, to zoom out and see the forest, right? See what's actually happening here, and work accordingly.